And we are blessed. With your great heart and the love of your heart, I want you to take a look at this. Just 3 weeks ago, we put out a request. It was very synchronistic because in the past, this church had partnered with another organization to help provide Christmas for children that needed some help. Well, we missed the deadline because we didn't know we were supposed to start in October, and we didn't find out that until the first week in December. But I just had this feeling, and so I called Caring for Children, and some of you heard the story already, but the woman that I spoke to literally started crying on the phone, and she said, "You're never going to believe this, but we just had 21 children who have come into our care. Some are in protective services with their mom and just really in dire need." And she said she was at lunch, and she said, "I said, Lord, you've got 21 children to take care of." And then I called and we said, "We've got a community that would wonder if you had some children. So you have created this, a true miracle. And we're going to just imbue these gifts with our love throughout the service. Caring for Children representatives, caseworkers are going to be here to pick them up. They have a sleigh, compliments of U-Haul that I don't know where they got their reindeer, but we'll find out. But they're going to pick these up. And then bears, and then there's even this thing that is going to hospice. Bears, and I think it's a 2-hump camel. I don't remember what that's called. What is it? I just was wondering if you knew. Thank you. So we're going to bless all of these throughout the service for the children and for these that go to hospice as well. So it's a wonderful time of the year to really pause and give thanks. I love it that the two holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, are all about giving and receiving and acknowledging and being in that spirit of gratitude. So thanks to each and every one of you. Today, as I mentioned earlier, we complete this series of Advent where we have talked about hope and then peace and love and joy. All of these we recognize are attributes of our soul. They're part of us. They're part of our spiritual nature. And we focus on them and illuminating their presence in our life and realizing that they are available to us as we express them. Today, when I talk about joy, I can't help but remember, some of you may have learned this song as a little girl in Sunday school. We used to sing, "I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart, down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart to stay." I love that you know that song. That we sang that song as, how many of you grew up singing that as a child? I remember singing it in my Sunday school class, and I sang, "I've got down in my heart today." And my Sunday school teacher said, "Honey, it's down in my heart to stay." And I thought, oh, so it's there all the time. I have joy all the time. But then there were those times I thought, what happened to that joy that was supposed to be down in my heart to stay? Anybody else have those days? Where is that joy? Well, today that's what we are going to talk about, is the joy in our life and really what that represents. And so, I ask you to consider, how would you describe your relationship with the presence of joy? What ignites your joy? Are you aware of when your joy seems to be really ignited? And are there times, and is there anything that seems to dampen your joy? And is it possible for anything or anyone to steal our joy? So we're going to consider those things today. When you think about joy, my definition of joy is that joy is an abiding presence. Because just like God is an abiding presence, joy is an abiding presence. And that joy is the awareness of our true nature, living in that assurance and that awareness. And that joy gives us the freedom to stretch and to grow, gives us the freedom to even make mistakes, because we realize that it is well with my soul. And I'm free to evolve That's really what joy is. It's something that really never departs. Quite often, we confuse joy with happiness. Happiness is a state of mind. Happiness is a feeling or an emotion that when things are going well, we are happy. When things are not going well, we are not happy. We're unhappy. So it's related to circumstances and how things are going. But joy is different than that. Joy is a state of being. That no matter what is happening out here, we may be happy, we may be unhappy, but there is an ever-abiding presence of joy. The scripture says that weeping may endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. There's a number of scriptures that actually that talk about joy and give us a little insight to what they are. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And do not suffer, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. That our strength is the joy of the Lord, but it requires us to really rest in our sense of connection, to know that there is an ever-abiding presence, that no matter what is happening, and we may be upset, we may be afraid, and even in the midst of those things, there can be an undercurrent, that even when all of that is going on, that somehow deep inside, you still know it is well with my soul. That is evidence of joy. Teilhard de Chardin said, joy is the most infallible sign of the presence of God. It's the most recognizable sign of the presence of God. And so joy, the root of the word joy is actually the root of the word grace, charis. Both of them mean that it's the influence of the divine upon our heart and our life and its reflection in our life. That joy is an outcome or a natural result of our being connected and reflecting the divinity through our life. That when we are doing that, that is, we truly will be and can be in a state of joy. And so at this particular time of season, we look at joy in the context of the Christmas story. Over the past few weeks, we started talking about joy and gratitude. And then we talked about hope and gratitude in the spirit of Christmas. And then we talked about peace and Joseph, that Joseph represents an aspect of our being, as does Mary. We looked at Mary through the context of love. That the story that we call the Christmas story comes from two different gospels in the Bible. That Matthew talks about Joseph, and it shares the Christmas story through the eyes of Joseph. Luke shares the Christmas story through the eyes of Mary. And then we tend to just blend the two and then throw in some other things, sometimes even like elves and Santa Clauses and reindeers and all sorts of things, and make it a fun Christmas story. Well, today we're going to look at the birth of Jesus and what that means and how that relates to joy in our life. Now, in Unity, we place emphasis on the divinity of all people. And that's really different because a lot of Christianity places the focus is on original sin. And, I don't know about you, but I have never looked at a little baby and said, you are the cutest little sinner I've ever seen. It just doesn't, I just don't think that way. That, somehow we know we are born perfect and in the likeness and image of God. But we don't know it. We have to grow into that awareness. And if we're not growing into that awareness, we may show up as separate. And that's where our acting out through our free will can cause us to look and act very evil and things such as that. But by our very nature, we are created in the likeness and the image of our Creator. And God said, and that is good. And nothing changed that we're a chip off the source block. Nothing can make you undivine. Nothing can take away your original virtue. But you can think you're not virtuous. You can think you're not holy. And what causes us to do that is what we're going to look at some today. So in Unity, we celebrate Jesus as a very pure individual who embodied the Christ potential, and he came to teach us that we're here to do the same thing. But we don't look at Jesus as the only one that accomplished that, because we believe what he said when he said, the things that I do, ye shall do, and even greater. And so we celebrate his life and his accomplishment, but we really hold true what he said. And in Unity, we call that the Christ, that he experienced his Christ potential. He was God in expression, and he told each of us here to do the same thing. Now, we may not have yet measured up to being able to embody and live it and express it, but each of us are growing into it. So you are all Christ. You may just not show up like that yet. We don't fully know that. So joy, in the sense of all of this, joy is this abiding presence. So the Christmas story, where we talk about joy, I'm going to turn and talk about the shepherds. And there were shepherds living out in the field nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. Now, see, I find this fascinating. An angel appears, and the glory of the Lord shines about, and we are terrified. That I think we're really, it was Marianne Williamson said that what we're afraid of is our power. It's not our weaknesses, but it's our power that we're afraid of, our divinity. That we can't really yet see it. We're opening up to that. So the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Fear not. Do not be afraid." Now, if you've been tracking along with this, you notice that the angel said to Joseph, "Fear not." The angel said to Mary, "Fear not." Now here the angel is saying to the shepherds, "Fear not." That's a constant part of the story, that part of our spiritual journey is realizing that you're never going to outgrow your fears. Not as long as you have skin on. Your fears will evolve as you evolve. The thing is learning to walk with fear and not have it take you over. Learning that I may be afraid, but I don't have to be consumed by my fears. So the angels say, "Fear not." And in this case, they said, "Fear not, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy." And all the people for today, Christ is born in Bethlehem, and then he went on to say, "Go and see for yourself." So I bring you good news that will cause you great joy. This good news is one is being born who's going to teach you what it is to know yourself as one to God, one with God. This one that is being born is going to teach you that you too are divine, that is the good news. And so there's much to celebrate when we really do realize that we are one with God and that we too are divine. And so it's something that we can never lose, but we can certainly lose sight of it. I think often we don't even realize it, but we have kind of overlaid our ideas of God with Santa Claus. With Santa Claus, we sort of pray to God sometimes like we do Santa Claus, that this is our wish list and things like, and we think, well, if I've been nice, God may listen, but if I've been naughty, and how many of you have been naughty? So it's like, how many of you just don't even pray? You've been so naughty. That sometimes we may feel like that. And I think children sometimes can be the best teachers because of the way they are in relationship. There's such an innocence, and then their relationship with the idea of Santa Claus. I was talking to a woman this week who has a 4-year-old grandson, and she was keeping him one day, and she had been trying to feed him lunch, and he would not eat. And she said the house kind of made a creaky noise, and he said, "What is that?" And she said, "Honey, I don't know, but you need to eat." And then he said, "Is that Santa Claus?" She seized the moment and said, "Well, it may be, Noah. Santa Claus may be, looking around this time of year." She said his eyes got real big and he picked up his fork and he ate everything on his plate. That children are often motivated this time of year to clean their room and do those things because you know what they've been told, you're naughty or you're nice. Here are 3 letters. These are real letters that children sent to Santa Claus, and to me they're very telling about our innocence and this relationship to being naughty and nice related to what we may or may not get. The first one says, "Dear Santa, I don't think you can get into our house this year. We don't have a chimney, and my father just installed a very expensive security system. I still want a bike, skateboard, trampoline, and a puppy. Leave them in the backyard. Please also bring a gallon of root beer for me and put a yellow note on it that says Miles so I won't have to share it with my little sister. I will leave cookies and popcorn in a plastic bag for you and your deers on the porch." The second one from 4-year-old Julie says, Dear Santa, eat anything. Come cuddle. Feed your deers. I want a monkey. I love you. P.S. I really love you. Isn't that sweet? And then this one is my favorite. Dear Santa, there are 3 little boys who live at our house. There's Jeffrey. He is 2. There's David. He is 4. And there's Norman. He is 7. David is good some of the time. Jeffrey is good some of the time. But Norman is good all of the time. I am Norman. It's that thing about, I got to be good to get what I want. And it really does translate over to us when it comes to our spirituality. Now, there is the law of cause and effect. Just like the law of gravity, if you go fall off a cliff, you're going to get hurt. But it's not because the law of gravity punished you, it's because that's the way the law of gravity operates. Jesus taught us about giving and receiving, and whatever we do, for every action, there's an outcome. And we reap what we sow, but that is not a God punishing us. That is the outcome of our own actions. But by our very nature, we are good. We are made in the image of God. And so joy, we begin to open to more joy when we realize that this isn't earned, it isn't self-generated, but it's source originated. That this is who we are. That's the message of Jesus being born in the manger. You know, with the animals, the story says there was no room for Jesus in the inn. Well, that wasn't an accident. That wasn't an oversight. If the Holy Spirit could conceive a child, do you not think that same Holy Spirit could make a room be vacant? I mean, if all of these other miracles happened, we shouldn't believe that a room could not have been made available. This part of the story is to make a point that when you stay in an inn, when you stay in a room, there's a price to be paid for staying there. When you're born in a manger, when you're with the animals, that is the most natural place to be. That knowing who we are comes in the natural state of just our ordinary self. That's where it's born. It's not something we earn, but it is absolutely who we are. So joy is about realizing that this presence is always available, and that an abiding presence, the abiding presence of God and the abiding presence of joy are available to us. The second thing that joy teaches us is how to be in touch with our spiritual nature, that to know ourselves as spirit. You see, I can only know myself as a spiritual being to the same degree I can know you as spirit. You can't want a blessing for yourself and a curse for someone else. And if I don't believe that you are nature, I can't hold you outside of God's grace and hold myself inside. Our world right now, it is no coincidence that the politicians are being far more polarized, that people are literally saying that we shouldn't allow certain people, into our country, or if you don't believe this way, you can't be here. Well, I truly believe the reason that it is rising to the surface is to be healed. It's for all of us to look at where in our life do we put some outside and others inside. Where do we make some worthy of God and others unworthy of God? Now, we're not condoning violence. We're not condoning those sorts of things. But what we are saying is we can't say that some people are not children of God without saying that we're not either. And I truly believe that's what's being healed in our world today. And so that's part of joy, is helping us to be in touch with our spiritual connection. Can anything rob us from our joy? Can anyone or anything else take it away? Teddy Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. A Course in Miracles said, the ego lives by comparison. It is the ego. The only thing that can really take away my joy is my own ego, is my own losing sight of who I really am or who you really are as an expression of God. The character that represents this in the Bible story is King Herod. If you remember this Christmas story, everyone rejoiced, everyone was happy, everyone wanted to go see and was excited to be a part of this great experience that was taking place. But listen to this, it comes from Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, This means Jesus had now already been born. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and come to worship him. These were the astronomers, the magi, the wise men, who would look at the stars and tell the farmers when to plant. And they were very wise and could use the heavens to know when to do certain things. They told them when to do certain ceremonies to the moon god or the sun god or whatever. So they had seen this bright star, which to them meant a Messiah, a Savior had been born. And they set out to follow it. And as they stopped in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, they told King Herod that they were going to see this new king. And it says, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and we have come to worship him. But when Herod the king heard these things, he was deeply troubled. Now, why was he troubled? Why was King Herod troubled? Because King Herod was already king of the Jews. So if this Messiah has been born, who is now all of a sudden king of the Jews, what does that mean he is? And if people are going to worship him, what does that say about his power? And what will they still listen to him? So he told the wise men, go find him, and when you do, come tell me where he is, because I want to go worship as well. Well, we know that was not his intention. The wise men went and they found him, and as the story says, they walked in, they fell to their knees, they worshiped him, they brought gifts of gold and myrrh and frankincense, they left their gifts. But then it says, an angel of the Lord appeared unto them and said, go home a different way. Do not go back through Bethlehem. They were warned and told to go a different way. Now they had to make a decision. Are we going to listen to the king who could have our heads, or are we going to listen to this angel? Well, they listened to the angel and they went home a different way. I also think it's very significant because when you encounter the Christ presence, when you encounter Holy Spirit, when you encounter a higher awareness, it will often cause you to go in a new direction, to change, that you can't necessarily go back the way that you were before. So they went a new way. As the story continues, Herod found out they never came back to him, and he was angry. And so what did he do? He issued an edict that said, every child in the whole province that is 2 years old or younger will be killed. That's in the Bible. And what it is telling us is he was trying to destroy anything that could threaten him. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what part of me could be like that? Is there any part of you that ever says, I'm going to have my way no matter what? That's, it's not to that extent. He's just an exaggeration of the part that would rob and kill the Christ child or the Christ message. It reminds me of that character known as the Grinch. Remember the Grinch that stole Christmas? What color is the Grinch? Green with envy. The Grinch's head is real big. The head is real big because that represents an exaggerated sense of who I am, self-importance, me first, selfishness. And the Grinch was very mean-spirited, very much like Herod was. There's a lot of similarities there. The story of Grinch says, every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch who lived just north of Whoville did not. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. See, there's an incredible similarity. If you know the story, the Grinch went and he wanted to spoil Christmas for everybody. He wasn't happy, and if he wasn't happy, he didn't want anybody to be happy. So he went down and he stole everything that had to do with Christmas. And it said just before he had all the stuff loaded and he was getting ready to go throw it in the dump, the Grinch could hardly believe his ears. He began to get furious because he could hear they weren't crying and wailing like he hoped they would be. They were singing and laughter. It made no sense to him. He began to get furious, but then something happened. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming somehow, or it just came the same. It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. Suddenly, the Grinch realizes that Christmas is about more than presents or decorations or a feast. He has a thought. He has a thought that he never thought before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas perhaps means a little bit more. This is the thing that transformed the Grinch. He wasn't transformed by the love of friends because nobody even knew he was there. He wasn't changed by remorse because he was real happy with what he was doing. But what changed him was a realization. He had a thought that led to an encounter with something bigger than his self. You see, he got his self out of the way long enough to connect with a spirit. He began to realize the spirit of Christmas touched him. And it is the spirit of our true nature when we realize I'm not just an individual self. I don't have to be an ego that's trying to control everything and everybody and have everything my way in order for me to be safe. You see, we all do that in little ways or not so little or subtle ways. But when we're doing that, it's a great opportunity to realize, to say, wait a minute, my ego is getting a little out of control here. I'm trying to be safe. I'm trying to control things. It's time to let that spirit reach me and minister to me again. The scriptures talk about something called grieving the spirit. And I think that when we can't get ourselves out of the way sometimes, that tends to be what happened. It says, they say that his heart grew and grew that day, and they lived happily together. Fahu foray, dahu foray, welcome Christmas, come this way. Christmas, Christmas Day. A Course in Miracles says that a miracle is a shift in perception. What happened to him was a shift in perception. And through that shift, it opened him to a spirit. Well, joy for us is about knowing that we're always connected and that we're always spirit. And the third thing that allows us to do then is freedom to grow and to evolve. Richard, would you give me that song? I think it interesting that in the Christmas story, no one had it easy, but they had great transformation. You know, some of the most rewarding things in life, like to get in shape, is not easy, but it is simple. To lose weight is not easy, but it is simple. We know what to do. To give up a habit is not easy, but it is simple. And it's taking those simple steps is what makes the difference in all of our lives. Mary's journey was not easy. She was asked to bring something forth that was beyond human creation. Joseph's plight was not easy. He was asked to take a woman and protect her that, according to the Jewish law, should have been stoned. And the shepherds, well, if you abandoned your flock and just took off to follow and find someone, you would be stoned. But when the angel said, leave your flock and go, they did. And the wise men, as I said earlier, they were supposed to go back to Herod, but they listened to the angel and they went another way. Each of them took incredible risk. They were willing to stretch themselves. And I think that that's what all of us are called to do, is to be willing to stretch and to know that I can forgive. I can be more than I know myself to be. I can show up in greater ways. Sometimes we don't recognize God in all things. There's a final story about a church and a minister having a Christmas Eve service. And the service was to begin with a little children's pageant where they were going to enact the nativity scene. All of the parents with children were told, if your child doesn't have a specific part, then just have your child dress up as either an angel or a wise man or a shepherd or a sheep. So that night, in came lots of angels and wise men and shepherds and sheep, and they had them all lined up, and they're just getting ready to walk out when a young father with his hair all messed up and two little twins come running up, and they've got on quite the costumes. They are Batman and Spider-Man. And the minister's eyes get big, and the little kids have been crying, and the father's all just shoveled, and he says, we understood. We knew we were supposed to bring them as an angel, a shepherd, a sheep, or a wise man. And they insist these are the wisest men they know. I hope you can stretch and fit them into your Christmas story. I share that with you because often in life, we're asked to fit things into our story that we didn't think was possible. We're asked to see beyond the costume, sometimes our own, sometimes that of another. But this Spirit is not just a story, it is alive and well. And that each of us are called and created to be that miracle. You see, the great journey of Christmas is very much like the journey you had with Santa Claus. It's a journey of believing to disbelieving to becoming. You see, that's the Christ story. It's believing, it's engaging with our disbelief, and it's to fully embody and become. And I want all of you to know that you're capable of great miracles. Every day you create miracles. And if you ever doubt you've created a miracle, I want you to remember this scene. Look at all these packages around. Do you know this is a miracle for 21 children and 21 families? That to them, this was something that was impossible that is going to happen. Well, each and every day we have the capacity to do things that we used to think were impossible. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and just allow yourself to sit a little more uprightly. And to listen to that familiar tune that Richard is playing. It says, "Oh, holy night." That the stars were shining brightly. There's a powerful place in this song where it says, "Fall on your knees." You see, to fall on your knees in this case is meant to be so filled with awe, A-W-E, for it to finally reach you, the miracle of your life, the miracle of all life, the wonderment of it all. To realize and to allow this realization to reach you will cause you to fall to your knees. It's a humility that is born of spirit. It's a humility that brings forth the greatest dignity, the greatest power, because it is anchored in love and respect and peace and joy and hope for all humankind, for all creation. This Spirit is not something that you need to struggle for, because it is your very nature. It is as close as your breath, and it is continually growing you, developing you, just the way you're meant to be grown and developed and to evolve right now.